Matt and I saw your notes, and I was like, oh, hope he doesn't need his notes to preach his sermon.
We literally did.
I'll never use that again.
Yeah.
But then we remembered you weren't preaching Moriah.
Oh, they were here on Sunday morning?
Yeah, they were still on the...
We were doing our sound check. He's like, you think he's going to need these?
But we couldn't understand.
That was confusing because I sent my notes from Thursday to Flora. And of course, I wasn't preaching the same sermon. I had to change all that because I did Nebo.
It's a good thing you didn't preach the same sermon.
Because I got to preach it this week.
4 more times.
4 more times.
So you did it in 24 minutes. Are you going to have a repeat performance?
22.
Ooh, throwing it down.
You didn't do 24 in Clay, did you?
No, you were closer to 30.
25, 26.
Really?
I had time left. Huh. I said everything I need to say.
Matt, on the other hand, I mean, you lost your voice once. You would think you would learn from this, you know?
But I didn't.
No, you just 38 minutes.
Give it all she's got.
What did you talk about for so long?
I talked about
It's
all
only
of
mentioned
Abraham's
3
life.
times in the Bible. Do you make stuff up?
No, I talked about all of Abraham's life. All the way from the
It's
beginning.
about the message was about Mount Moriah, not Abraham.
Yeah, I didn't really go there to the end.
The end was actually the best part. Like when you were stopping.
Like when he said I'm done.
I haven't got
Whenever
to
he's
it
like,
yet, but
let's take the communion. Everybody was like, whoo.
Hallelujah!
the first
We made it.
The first 10, 15 minutes
They thought they were in a
wasn't even about Abraham, but
No, it was about mountain.
it was the application
Dude.
going into it. And I'm
What
like,
did you talk about?
and I'm like, huh, are you going to get to? And then you actually did. You jumped
15
into
minutes is a little generous. I didn't do.
Oh, it was 20.
What did
Actually, I enjoyed that part too.
5
No,
or
it
6.
was good. It
5 or 6.
was at least 10.
He talked about climbing mountains. The first dude that
Climbed
summited
Everest. Yep.
Everest. Yeah.
Did some good quotes. It
First
was-
person that allegedly.
Hillary?
Yeah. Sir Edmund.
Sir Edmund, not Hillary Clinton.
I thought you were going on his name. When you said election, and then you said
Yeah.
Easy.
Okay,
Easy.
there we go.
playing off your words.
I'll email you later.
Anyways, no, it was good. It was good.
What was your message?
Abraham.
That's all you got. And you talked for 38 minutes. Abraham.
I just talked about all of his progression of his faith. He's called to go, called to wait on God's promise.
No, you had 3 S's.
I did.
That's Chat GPT right there.
No.
I
'Cause I
leaned
tried.
over to my wife and I said, there it is. The 3, like,
3
you know.
S's.
It was step,
Step,
stand, and something else.
surrender.
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 I never made it to surrender. I'm still on the stand part.
So he
You
had,
got 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
he had to take steps
Where are
of
you
faith
listening to it at?
I was listening to it on the
in a Dodge
Facebook. Yeah.
3500.
On the Facebook post.
Last Sunday night's Facebook Live?
Yes. I mean, I listened to it this morning. But yeah.
Watched it live Sunday night.
No. What? I missed something there.
It's on Facebook Live.
Hey, one thing I was
Not
going to
really, but
about your sermon
that's where we watch it at.
that I think is unique. We always read the story of Abraham and Isaac through a Western lens, and we always read it like, how in the world could we ever get to a point of like even thinking it's okay to sacrifice your son? But in where Abraham was at that time, that is the most common practice, is to sacrifice your son to a god in order for future blessing. And so that is what all of the surrounding cultures expected to do to receive the future promise. And actually in this picture is God saying, I'm not like the other gods. I am the one who provides. So you got there with the atoning sacrifice. But actually that practice was something widely accepted and done, which is crazy because we can't even fathom how you get to that point. But it would not have been uncommon for that to happen.
I spent quite a bit of time when I did that message on Thursday night setting up the concept of type and antitype or foreshadowing. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that we have been distracted by Western human emotion when we read the story, because its most common application jumps immediately to, how could you ever be that committed to your faith? Do I have that much faith? And that's totally the wrong application, I think, of the story. It's not about can we do that. It's what God did do.
Yeah.
So God stopped Abraham, but he didn't stop his own offering through Christ. And so to me, that's the beauty of the picture. This is a messianic foreshadowing. Now, Abraham, here's the challenge and why the faith of Abraham is essential here. He didn't know that. He just knew he'd been made a promise by God. And so he took God at his word somehow. And I love what the Hebrews writer says. He reckoned that somehow, even if necessary, God could raise his son from the dead.
Yep.
The thing that is really cool too is in verse 5 of chapter 22. Terry Sapp and I were talking about this. So Terry, if you're listening, he pointed out that in verse 5 he uses the word "we" twice. We will go up the mountain and we will return.
Yep.
Like he knew before he went up the mountain.
That's the Hebrew writer's implication.
Right.
He reckoned that somehow, even if necessary, God could raise him from the dead.
Yep.
Wild.
But to me, the full point of the story is this is a foreshadowing of God's providing the sacrifice. Where's the ram dead? Where's the sacrifice? God will provide.
Yep.
I did a little playing around with Google Maps on it because where's this ram at? Right? And if you watch Joel Kramer Expedition Bible,
That's the one you sent me.
on YouTube,
Yeah.
he talks about the historical realities of the Temple Mount, where the Golden Dome is today, being the location where Solomon built the first temple, the threshing floor of Arunai that David bought, the Jebusites' property. So that's where Solomon builds a temple. That's where the second temple is built. That's destroyed, and that's where Hadrian builds a temple to Jupiter to kind of, it's playing religious trump games there. That's where, when that's destroyed, that's where Islam comes in and builds the Dome of the Rock. Why did they choose that location? Because that's the place where the sacrifice was, at least Isaac was to be offered. So where was the ram? And I said I don't know this, but I would not be surprised if the ram was 525 yards away, because I measured it on Google Maps, and that's how far it is to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the great,
Where they believe the crucifixion
where the crucifixion was, and that it's not very far. You're standing there, you can see it. You can't walk straight to it.
Not now.
Today, but you could have it. 5 minutes. There's the ram, son. Go get him. I don't know that that's the location, but so Jesus, because that's the only thing that threw me at first in my study was why wasn't the cross right there?
Yeah.
Well, the cross was where the ram was because God provided the ram. Kind of neat.
Those are really cool. Which all of you have been to Israel, but just south of the temple now, there's a museum. I went there with you, and they have a really, I thought, cool visual display on that whole theme of that rock, and that being the place where everything that you just walked through, that Abraham took Isaac there and goes through the generations up until now, and where the Temple Mount is now. But it's really cool because they do a lot of visuals museum and some video stuff in there. But they got laid out. But it's just straight south of
the Southern Steps Archaeological Park.
Yes, that's it. So I don't know if you've ever been through that, but it's really cool. As you were talking, all those images popped in my head instantaneously. Forgot about that place until just now. But
The thing that I think that jumped out to me, it was fun because no matter how many times you read or preach this story, like there's something else that you just grabs your attention.
Oh, it's rich, right?
And
it's incredible.
For me, the thing that stuck out this time more than anything is the age of Isaac. Scholars say he's somewhere between 15 and 20 years old. Abraham would have been 115. Like, he was willing to be tied up and put on this altar. He had the exact same faith. He had seen it modeled through his father.
Yeah, Isaac's in his prime.
Contemplate all the similarities between Isaac and Jesus.
I mean, Isaac carries his own wood to the sacrifice. Jesus carries the cross. The Father gives up his one and only Son, John 3:16. God gave up his one and only Son. I mean, the parallels are insane.
Isaac was strong enough that he had to be willing.
Yeah.
Like, let himself be bound up.
They go on a 3-day journey. He's in the grave for 3 days. I mean...
the Hebrews writer makes that a little more poignant when he says that he was as good as dead.
Yeah.
Because when they leave home and travel for 3 days. Through the entirety of that journey, he knows at the end, at least Abraham does, where this ends. So for 3 days, can you think about that?
Yeah.
3 days. Well, like, how do you lay down at night and sleep thinking about, and 2 days I'm going to kill my son, and tomorrow I'm going to kill my son? That's crazy.
Yeah, but I don't. So
I know that's Western.
yeah,
It is so hard to not put our heads there.
I don't even think we have a framework to really understand that.
You know, and that may be the whole intent of the story as well. Because it's incomprehensible that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
Yeah.
Why would God do that? Why does he love us that much?
Dustin Ruhal texted me yesterday and said, bold move preaching on Abraham on Father's Day. But we were going back and forth on the parallels because they're rich.
Yeah.
You say we don't have that Western, that or we have that too much that Western mindset, but you still have that relationship no matter what culture between father and son.
Yeah.
And so it's still, even though like
I'm not denying
customary, that would be hard, but man, just
Intensified,
Be
though, by
hard.
the fact that this child was born to you and was physically impossible. Why did he have to wait 25 years?
Yep.
To prove the point that you can't do this.
I think he's holding on to that though too. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Absolutely.
it's like
Yeah. He's holding on
okay.
the promise that it comes through Isaac.
Yeah, and so
Yeah, because he's asked if Ishmael can be the guy.
So that's why Hebrews says like he would not have seen anybody raised from the dead, but he has faith that God could raise him from the dead.
correct.
Yeah.
So I think he, you know, we have a Western mindset of reading the story, but then too of like Abraham was committed to this because he knew like, well, he's got me this far, so
He's committed.
I don't even know what's going to happen.
He's
but
committed to God.
Yeah.
And he's willing to do anything he says.
That's right. Yeah.
But you're so right, though. Like, this is not a story about Abraham. This isn't a story about Isaac. It's about Jesus.
Yep. 100%.
But it's so hard not to put our feet in that spot.
Wouldn't it be an incredible place to be, though, to be so far along in your faith that, I mean, it's no retreat. There's no wavering at this point. He's just said yes so many times that he's all in. That'd be incredible.
Well, I liked how you tied it to the climbing the mountain story about the death zone on Everest. Like you have to keep moving.
Yeah.
I was curious. You never went into that, but when he said if you stop moving, you die. What was he referring? Like because of the elements, because of
the elevation. So when you get above 26,000 feet, your blood cells die faster than they can reproduce, and so you begin to get lightheaded, nauseous. Your body literally starts to die
because
at
of
that
the
elevation.
lack of oxygen.
Yeah, and so that's why like Sir Edmund Hillary.
So by continuing to move, that keeps the blood pumping.
Literally,
Well-
you fall asleep, you die.
If you don't keep moving, you can't get down. So you have to get up and down
Yeah.
quickly.
You got an 8 to 12 hour window.
Wow.
They just go and
Yeah.
catch
I thought that was pretty powerful.
There's-
that part.
So Matt told me about it on Sunday, and I was just kind of looking it up. Not that I didn't believe you, but there are people.
wanted to know more.
I wanted to know more.
Fact checker.
There's people that die on Everest because they're waiting to get to the top, and it gets backlogged,
Right,
and they can't
right.
move.
and literally they're just waiting.
11 people died last year waiting to get to the top.
Yeah,
On
Isn't that
other
crazy?
people who had stopped.
I mean, there's a faith lesson in that too.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah, it'll
if
drag you
you
down.
stop, there's a chain effect that's
Yeah, for
behind
sure.
you that you may or may not even see.
And I mean, as you're going up
You could use that this week.
Everest,
Build off
though,
him this last
like you're literally watching bodies that are laying there.
Stepping on them.
Yeah, you're
Stepping
stepping
over
over them. Yep. I mean, they found the body of the guy who attempted to climb it in 1923. So 100 years, his body is still there. They found it, and he's got his name in his shirt, pinned, to his sweatshirt. But those are the guys that are the heroes because, like, we're talking about, and Abraham as well, in the sense of the fact that, like, they had nothing.
Yeah.
Like today, they're going up there with oxygen tanks. They're going up with Sherpas. You pay the money. You go up the mountain, right? But we're talking about 1923,
Wearing
1953.
lacrosse rubber
Yeah.
boots.
Yeah. willing to risk it at all. And that's the Abraham story.
I mean,
That's nuts.
when we went out to Colorado with the guys last year to go hunt, everyone had the little canisters of oxygen, sucking on them after we got out at the rest areas.
Yeah, what? 10,000 feet?
In Illinois.
Yeah, so to think, what is Everest?
26,000.
26.9 or something
26.
like that.
Yeah, that's what you said.
So the last
No, it's 29.
29.
29.
Yeah.
Oh, 29.
The last 3,000 plus feet,
All right.
you got to keep moving.
So like they'll do base camps, and I think that's the thing with Abraham's story is like this isn't a call like, hey, I call you, and then I'm going to immediately call you to go, sacrifice your son. This is a lifelong journey where he continues to ask him to do these things, and even though he fails, like he goes outside of God's will, and
Yep.
God doesn't forget about him, and that's another lesson in the whole story.
What's the highest mountain you've ever been on or been next to?
How tall is Mount Carmel
Not that.
in Illinois? I don't know. It would have to have been in Israel with you guys, probably.
Well, when you get off
No.
the ski lift in Vail, it's 12.4.
But I don't think that counts as climbing a mountain.
It's hard to breathe. I think that'd be the highest. I was at 11,000 elk hunting, though.
I guess I did. I guess, yeah.
We were in
The highest we've probably been is that, well, we didn't even go all the way up there. It was Argentina.
Argentina, yeah.
We were right next to, we could see the highest mountain in South America, but we didn't go up it. We were at the base of it.
So it is 22,841.
That one in Argentina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. How high were you?
We were like 12
Probably.
or 13.
You can drive up that high.
Yeah, and it
Like we're in
still
cars.
looked massive.
You
Like, it
imagine-
was
imagine
crazy.
Double, then some.
Yeah, I know. That's the biggest mountain I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Have you seen some of the footage, though, of people climbing Everest?
Did you see
Yeah.
McKinley?
Yeah, what is McKinley? I've seen.
20,290 or something like that.
Wait, that's Denali in Alaska, right?
No, it's now called McKinley.
Oh, okay, but it's in Alaska.
We unwoke it.
Well, I didn't think
renamed
Denali was.
Gulf of America.
Was it Rainier?
I've never seen
that
it.
Shove
Oh,
climbed?
Rainier. What is Rainier?
Rainier? Shove climbed that.
I've seen Rainier from the air.
Yeah, I've seen Rainier from there too, but not from the ground.
I'm trying to find the elevation of Mount Carmel, but it's all in Hebrew. I can't read it.
Mount Carmel's not that big.
No, it's going to be like 3,500.
Maybe.
It was cool.
Jerusalem.
That was the first
Jerusalem
mountain I was on there.
3,000 something.
I mean, we drove up on Pikes Peak last year.
That's high.
and,
It's 14.
It's 14, and it was awesome. I was the only one in my family that didn't get altitude sickness.
So
Oh
we
my
drove
God.
up.
double that
Mount
Everest.
Mount Carmel is only 1791.
Really?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Pikes Peak, it took us driving up it. It took about an hour, I think, to get up, which you're going real slow. But I
Right.
mean, it's crazy.
You can go down real fast.
You could. That'd be real scary.
Mount Carmel.
So why are we
is
talking about mountains so
456.
much? Back to Mount Sinai.
No, not Mount Sinai.
Moriah.
Not on purpose.
You got to take a step. You got to go with the Lord.
I think that's where God draws us out of our everyday life. You know?
I think it's where transformation genuinely, authentically takes place. Because it's one thing to know about God in your head, but it's another thing to follow him.
Yep.
I think we're all called for more. Like he calls us for more. He designed us for more. But it's really easy to stay, at sea level. It's really easy to go through that. And so it's that making that conscious effort. Like, no, I'm gonna seek you out.
Just throw it at the camera.
Oh, goodness. You broke my highlighter.
You're fired.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
It wasn't.
Did you really? Oh, man.
It wasn't mine. I think it's Matt's.
So, to me, Moriah is God saying, "What you can't do, I can."
Yeah. He says that in almost all of them.
What you can't do, I can. You can't save yourself.
Yeah.
You can't. Even if you offer Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
But I will offer my son. and he's perfect. And I'll save you. To me, that's.
And you have that same picture. We talked about this 2 weeks ago
Yes.
with Sinai, but it's that same picture every single time. God knows we can't. And so rather than us struggle and try to get him, what does he do? He comes down the mountain to be with his people. And you see that with, in the ark, but you see that more specifically with Jesus coming down to earth.
Our Hebrew friend pointed out that when you look at mountains in Scripture, it seems like in the Old Covenant, over and over again, we're having to climb up to a place to meet with God. And then in the New Covenant, over and over again, God came down and met us.
Yes.
There.
Ooh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of neat.
A lot of truth to that.
What was your wrap up?
The parallels between Jesus and Isaac.
Good.
You talked about Nebo.
I did talk about Nebo. Going to talk about Nebo 4 more times next week. But to me, Nebo is a warning and a promise. Are we done?
I don't know. Are we going to do it next week?
Oh, I thought we just put it all in here in one.
That's up to you.
Should we wait?
Well, it's you guys don't here.
We won't
be
here.
here. So
We better do it.
Okay. Let's do it.
There's a warning and a promise.
you can start a new one right now.
Me.
Stephen, you're here another hour.
Welcome. ReThink podcast continued.
Part 2.
The warning is, Moses in Numbers chapter 20, his punishment for striking the rock with his staff 2 times in anger, proclaiming, "Must we bring forth water from the rock?" When God said, "Speak to the rock." I find it interesting. God told him, "Get your staff, go speak to the rock." And he gets his staff and goes and hits the rock. Why did God tell him to get his staff? I couldn't figure that out. He spent 40 years as a shepherd wandering between his 40 years as prince and his 40 years as leading the people. He's wandering around with that shepherd staff. Go get the staff that what? You throw down when God calls you and turns into a snake. The staff that when you come before Pharaoh becomes a snake. The staff that strikes the Red Sea and parts the waters so the people walk through on dry land. That staff element, go get the staff, but speak. And the conclusion I came to there was that what God says matters. Words matter, and obedience is significant in the story. So God gives us instruction for life, and he wants us to follow it. And it is much better. He blesses us when we are obedient. When we resist and go our own way, we may end up in heaven, but the journey between here and there might be kind of hard.
Yeah.
Because we will have consequences for our sin.
I think it goes back to what you said a few weeks ago when you said, like, we live like God's joking.
Mm-hmm. That was on Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we don't take God real seriously. We take it more of like a suggestion of what we should do rather than living in obedience to what he's called us to do.
I loved your illustration in that sermon of your child and the woodpile.
Mm-hmm.
And you said after, you come back and he hadn't stacked the wood. You didn't tell us what happened to him, but you did say,
Because he
I
can't,
still love him.
can't say it on the podcast.
I still love him. And then I thought this next phrase was really important. He still sits at my table.
Mm-hmm.
But, right, life had been a lot easier on him if he would have done things as he was supposed to.
Yep.
Man, I think that's our story for so many people.
Yep.
He loves you. You're still going to be able to sit at his table through the grace and mercy of Jesus. But life would be a lot better if you do things his way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He says, don't have sex till you get married. Don't get drunk. Don't da-da-da-da-da. All these things can be forgiven, but there are consequences for sin.
Mm-hmm.
And so at first glance, it's like, come on, man, that's a pretty intense consequence for the action in that text. You don't get to go into the promised land. But look at the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
A piece of fruit, right? You took a bite of a piece of fruit. What was wrong there is God said, don't. And you did. So that's the first thing. That's the warning. Like, if you want to be blessed, be obedient. And then the second one is a promise. Because I think at the end of the day, Deuteronomy 32, Deuteronomy 34, Moses, who, by the way, it says still strong and had strong eyes at 120. Climbed a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Climbed Mount Nebo in the Pisgah mountain range. There's confusion there because sometimes it's called Pisgah, sometimes it's called Nebo. Nebo is one of the mountains, the highest one in the range. And he met with God there. And if you just let yourself sink into that part of the story, that is cool.
Met with God there.
He met with God there.
Mm-hmm.
And then God says, like, God plays tour guide. There's Dan.
Mm-hmm.
There's Beersheba. Say, like, look at Jericho. That's where the people are going to cross. You know, we know we end up later. That's where Jesus came to be baptized. And oh, look, over there on the hill, it's Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
The palace will be there. You know, the temple will be there. I don't know. That's pretty sweet to think about. It takes an hour and 56 minutes to drive from Nebo to Jerusalem if you don't stop at the gate coming into Israel, which is advised.
It is.
I was going to say, it's better.
2,300 feet above sea level.
Nebo? So it's almost straight across from Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And you would start lower there, I think, right? Because the Dead Sea was
Well,
what, 900
Lowest place on earth.
Yeah, I was
feet
gonna say
below
you'd
sea
go
level?
down and then you'd come back up.
So, like, if he's climbing it, he probably
Just a rift valley.
went roughly 3,000 feet and climb
It's pretty
at
cool.
100 and what'd you say 120
20.
And then you have he wouldn't have come up from the Dead Sea. He probably came from the back door.
Yeah.
But and then they have this strange piece where he dies, and God buries him. Right, but we know that wasn't the end. Again, our Hebrew friend, I cite him often, but he said their interpretation of that text is really more that the spirit and the flesh separated. God entombed the flesh and took the spirit. Did he die? Well, from a biblical perspective of life, what is death? Death is a foreshadowing of, separation from God. In this sense, he didn't really die. He's separated, which is what happens to a believer. The spirit goes to be with the presence of the Lord, and the flesh is entombed. And when God buries you, you can't be found because they don't know where Moses is buried, right? Still. And we know he didn't cease to exist because he comes back in a story we'll look at in a couple of weeks, the Transfiguration.
Mm-hmm.
There's Moses in the glory of the Lord. In the Promised Land, by the way, where God said you're not going to go in the flesh. I don't know. So I talked about heaven at the end. Because to me, that's the foreshadow of this. The shadow, looking at the shadow, is like, oh, that's the land that's ours. Milk and honey, cities we didn't build, vineyards we didn't plant, all those descriptors that God uses to tell them about the land. That's the physical place. That's the shadow of the reality. And he's trying to get them to see, I'm going to take you to heaven. And there'll be no more death, no more mourning, sorrow, pain, tears. God's going to take care of all that. Beautiful. That's it.
That's why it's 24 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. A warning and a promise. Did I
All
talk
right.
about anything else? Rattlesnakes.
I mean, yeah, you talk about other stuff, but that's the bulk of the main
I
stuff.
don't, the rattlesnakes. I don't want to give that away yet.
I was going to say, you got to be careful.
The terrain you were in, like I've never seen that, but that's cool. I didn't realize there was. What was the elevation of the mountains you were in New Mexico?
We hike between 4,600 and 5,000.
Man,
So not,
is that in northern New Mexico?
I don't know.
Okay, I said I've been to New Mexico several times. I don't remember the mountains like
South
that.
of Albuquerque.
I can say I've been to Albuquerque.
Yeah, I've been to
South
Albuquerque.
an hour and a half.
Oh, so that'd be southern.
2 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
Southern. Las Cruces.
Yeah, Las Cruces.
That's the bottom end.
Okay.
How do you
I've been
say
to
that?
Las Cruces.
That's not how I said it, but that's probably right.
That's how you say it.
Everything's, desert.
It's about
High desert.
hour and a half from my birthplace.
Rattlesnakes. And it works. But anyway, that's my opener. Anything you want to add? guys didn't study Nebo, so what
No.
do you have to add?
I got nothing.
Got nothing. Okay. Thanks for joining us. Good to be back on the ReThink podcast.